And as an outspoken critic of the president, what do you think is the worst policy he initiated?
Oh man, that's hard. I mean, he's doing a lot of really bad stuff every day, but when you think about the policy, I guess it's probably taking children away from their families down at the border and doing it not to make our country safer, but really doing it to try to hurt human beings. Because if he can make them hurt a lot, then maybe when they're scared for their lives, they won't come here. And that just seems horrible to me.
What are you doing for equal opportunities for people of color?
So that's a really good question. You know, every time I think about economic issues, I stop and say, but let's also see how it intersects with race. So here's an example. Housing. Number one way that middle-class families in America build wealth is housing. That is, you buy a house and over time it's worth a little more, and if everybody gets lucky and grandma and grandpa get to stay in the house till they die, the next generation gets a little wealthier and the next generation. So it shouldn't be a surprise to you that for a long, long time in America, the federal government subsidized the purchase of housing for white people. But for black people, they did something called redlining and discriminated against them on housing. So the consequence has been that white families had a whole lot better chance to build some wealth over time, and black families just didn't. Now the good news is law matters. So during the civil rights years, when those laws got tossed out, what happened was that homeownership went up for everybody, but it was coming up faster for African Americans. So starting to close that gap. And then around 2000, a lot of big banks looked at communities of color and said, wow, there's some wealth there. And they came in and targeted communities of color for the worst of the worst mortgages to strip value out of those communities. And our federal government covered its ears, covered its eyes, and pretended nothing had happened. And so that black-white wealth gap is back up there. So that today in America, for every $100 that the average white family has, the average black family has about $12. And that's a big part of because of government policy. So all of that. I have a housing policy, that's a good thing. Built 3.2 million new housing units across America. That's a good thing, and it would be housing for middle-class families and working families. But it also says we got to stop and recognize the role that the federal government played in discrimination, decade after decade after decade. And so in my housing plan, there's also a part for people who have lived in formerly redlined neighborhoods or people who got hit hard by the housing crash and haven't been able to get back into a home, and to give them some assistance so they can buy a home. This is one of those places where being neutral means people who are apart are going to stay apart. So we actually have to face up to what the government did wrong on behalf of all of America and say we're going to at least take steps to try to make that right.